So there's finally peace in Gaza. A ceasefire went into effect earlier today between Israel and Hamas, and all hostages are set to be returned in the next 72 hours. So this is the closest we've come to an actual end of the war in 2 years, but there are still some loose ends that could derail the whole process. I mean, for one, Hamas isn't disarming, which could be a bit of an outstanding issue. But for now, the fighting has stopped, and the opening is clearly there for long-term peace, so let's get into what we know. Now, big picture, this deal is based on Trump's 20-part proposal from September, where he outlined Israeli troop withdrawals, the demilitarization of Gaza, transitional governance, and more. Now, it's worth outlining exactly what this phase of the agreement, phase one, is what has been agreed upon and what has not yet been agreed upon. I think what we need to keep in mind is this is the start, it's not the end state. So what we have right now, phase one, is a ceasefire that is now in effect. We also have an IDF partial withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. That, too, has been completed and confirmed by external sources. We also have in phase one a hostage and prisoner exchange that is set to take place inside of the next 72 hours. And immediately, humanitarian aid, something like 600 trucks a day, will begin flowing into the Gaza Strip. That is right now. Also in phase one is the agreement to begin talks of future phases. Those future phases, those long-term issues that have not yet been agreed upon, the disarming of Hamas, the future governance of the Strip, the total withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza, and then, of course, the future of Gaza itself. All of that has not been agreed upon. Phase one is just setting the stage to get to those talks. Now, let's break down a little bit what has occurred so far and what we expect here in the next couple days. Starting out on the ceasefire piece, some reporting here from Manny Fabian at the Times of Israel says, quote, "The IDF completed a withdrawal to agreed upon deployment lines in the Gaza Strip on Friday at noon," so just a couple hours ago, "officially beginning a ceasefire and a 72-hour countdown during which Hamas is to release the 48 hostages it is holding under the first phase of the U.S. brokered deal. That puts the deadline at noon on Monday. Hamas has said it will not be able to locate all of the dead hostages in that time. Israel is aware of this." Steve Witkoff, the U.S. Special Envoy to everything around the world, he's doing this. He's doing the Iran nuclear negotiations and then the Russia-Ukraine negotiations, which don't appear to be happening anymore. Witkoff put out a statement just a couple hours ago saying that CENTCOM has confirmed that the Israeli Defense Forces completed the first phase withdrawal to the Yellow Line at 12 p.m. local time. The 72-hour period to release the hostages has begun. We actually have a note on that the United States will be committing 200 troops to Israel from CENTCOM to oversee the ceasefire. More on that here in a moment. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said, quote, "We are in the midst of a decisive development. Over the past 2 years, we have fought to achieve our war objectives, and one of the central goals is the return of all of the hostages, both the living and the dead. We are about to accomplish that. We could not have reached this point without the extraordinary assistance of President Trump and his team, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. These combined efforts, together with the courage of our soldiers who entered Gaza, created a joint military and diplomatic pressure that isolated Hamas. I believe this is what brought us to this moment." Now, Netanyahu called out in that speech one of the objectives of the Israeli military in Gaza, and we should note that as of now, the first phase of this agreement, there are other objectives that have not yet been met, other war aims that have not yet been met. That's one of the concerns as we talk about the viability of this peace lasting beyond these initial 3 days, maybe a week or longer. Steve Witkoff, the U.S. Special Envoy, said, quote, "The real hard work was done by the Prime Minister," talking about Netanyahu. "And here we are today because Hamas had no choice. They were forced into this agreement. The pressure was immense, and you have a stronger army." He was talking to Israel here. "You advanced significantly on the ground, and that's what led to this agreement." And we, of course, have some statements here from President Trump. I didn't see like an official video announcement from the president, so my apologies if I'm not showing that. But he did reference this deal in a lot of different one-off comments with reporters. Here's one of those statements.
Last night we reached a momentous breakthrough in the Middle East, something that people said was never going to be done. We ended the war in Gaza and really, on a much bigger basis, created peace. And I think it's going to be a lasting peace, hopefully an everlasting peace. Peace in the Middle East. We secured the release of all of the remaining hostages, and they should be released on Monday or Tuesday.
All right, so with the ceasefire now in effect, we are seeing humanitarian aid start to flow in mass into the Gaza Strip. My understanding right now, this one seems pretty straightforward. 600 trucks on or about moving into the Gaza Strip. This also comes with the allowing of Gazans to travel throughout the Strip. With the Israeli military moving back, we've seen quite a few pictures and videos of Palestinians moving from the south of the Strip to the north and vice versa. It also sounds like the Rafah crossing with Egypt will be reopened. Not entirely clear what is going to be transiting there, but it could be one more location for the much needed humanitarian aid to flow into Gaza. Another piece that has been agreed upon, the hostage and prisoner exchange. So my understanding right now is that within 72 hours after the deployment, and that clock has begun, all 48 hostages held in Gaza are set to be handed over to Israeli authorities. Of those 48, around 20 have been confirmed alive. And then as mentioned earlier, it sounds like the remains of some may take longer than the 72 hours. It sounds like Israel is okay with that, an understanding of that piece. Keep an eye on the 20 remaining alive. That is the big one here, the 3-day mark. Israel and the world is going to be expecting all 20 of those hostages coming home here in the next 2.5 days. They say after the hostages are released, Israel will release around 1,950 Palestinians in total. So we've got 20 living Israelis exchanged for 1,950 Palestinians. That includes 250 long-term prisoners, including some serving life sentences, plus 1,700 that were detained during the war. Some of those convicted of killing Israelis will be released to Gaza or deported abroad and barred from Israel and the West Bank. So kind of one-off situations there. Now, looking at the withdrawal, it's worth noting here, first off, the IDF has completed this. It has been verified by U.S. Central Command. It's a partial withdrawal. So I'm going to put a map up here that was published in Al Jazeera, and there's a couple notes from Abu Ali Express kind of outlining what it is you're seeing here. It's being referred to as the yellow line. So they say a good map from Al Jazeera that clarifies the situation in the Strip after the expected withdrawal of the IDF in the coming day to the yellow line. The yellow part of the map here constitutes 58% of the Strip. There were map corrections of about 5%, which brings us to 53% under IDF control. So during Phase 1, the IDF is still in control of 53% of the Gaza Strip. It says Beit Lahia and Beit Hanun in the north of the Strip are under Israeli control. Shajaya neighborhoods and part of Tufa and Zaytun in Gaza City still under Israeli control. More than half of Han Yunis under Israeli control. Almost all of Rafah under Israeli control. All of the crossings into the Strip remain under Israeli control. And this is one of those where it gets a step in that direction, but no doubt, certainly one of the Hamas demands from the opening days of this war was a complete Israeli withdrawal from the Strip. So you can see this is, again, view this as temporary with the hopes of it turning into a permanent solution. As of today, as of Phase 1 of this agreement, Israel is still in control of 53% of the Gaza Strip. Now, if we look at the Israeli war aims, I'm kind of bouncing around here, I got it, but one of the Israeli war aims was to ensure that nothing like the October 7th attack could ever happen again. One way to do that is to beef up Israeli control around the border with Gaza, maybe some sort of buffer zone with a significant troop presence. This is kind of that on steroids. They probably could accomplish that goal, backing off a significant percent from inside of Gaza. But technically, this could be one way to check that box. Now, another part of this Phase 1 is the agreement to move into future negotiations. I haven't seen a lot of reporting on this quite yet. My understanding is that the United States and the team there, Witkoff and Kushner, prompted by President Trump, wanted this to begin right away, immediately move into it. And I get it because, look, I want to be optimistic here, but we need to be realistic as well and see that there are a lot of ways this could fall apart in the very near term. So let's start talking about these long-term solutions to actually get to a peace deal. But of course, looking at those long-term negotiations, we have to keep in mind the Israeli war aims. What you're going to see right now are, and we are seeing this to a degree, anytime there's a negotiated settlement, no matter what it is, you're going to have elements from both sides that take pieces out of that to declare a victory in some way, shape, or form, or a win. We're going to see that. We're going to see that from Hamas, and we've seen that. I think it was the Houthis already today talked about how, look, Israel couldn't defeat the resistance. So they had to come to a settlement. That's part of the Hamas narrative here. And we've already heard from Witkoff and others, some within the IDF, saying, look, Hamas had to come to this term because we were pressuring them and killing them one by one and kind of tightening the noose around Gaza City. So expect to see arguments from both directions as to why this is a clear victory for either. I would say, as it sits right now, neither side is going to be very happy with this. At the very high level, you still have an armed Hamas. That is contrary to Israeli war aims from day one. There's no dispute. That is direct contradiction to what Netanyahu and his war cabinet has been talking about from day one. From the Hamas point of view, Israel still controls more than half of the Gaza Strip. That is clearly not a victory for them. All right, so I think it's pretty safe to say that nobody is perfectly happy with this deal as it sits, which leads us into the future negotiations here. A big one, of course, going to be around the disarming of Hamas. Al Jazeera talked about this, saying, quote, Hamas is unlikely to completely disarm, according to Azmi Kashawi, a Palestinian from Gaza and a researcher with the International Crisis Group. He said they could only envision Hamas surrendering some offensive weapons, such as short-range and long-range missiles. However, he believes Hamas will never give up its small arms and light weapons, nor hand over a map of its sophisticated tunnel network, which it spent decades building to resist Israel. He said, quote, Hamas will only give up light weapons when there is no need for these weapons. This means they will only hand them over to a Palestinian leadership that assumes control of the state after Israel ends its occupation. Again, the pessimistic side of me here says that seems a long ways off. You know, we haven't really got into viable conversations about what that next administration for Gaza will look like. So they're talking about it needs to be a viable follow-on solution that Hamas trusts and believe is stable enough to ensure that Israel doesn't come back in. To me, that seems a long ways off. So I think we need to look at this disarmament of Hamas as being a very real impediment to what could be a long-term peace deal here. Now, in terms of other news coming out of this, the Associated Press reported just yesterday that the United States is actually sending 200 troops to Israel to help oversee this ceasefire. And the details here are really important because I've already seen this kind of skewed in a couple different directions. The Associated Press says, quote, the United States is sending about 200 troops to Israel to help support and monitor the ceasefire deal in Gaza as part of a team that includes partner nations, non-governmental organizations, and private sector players. The officials who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss details said the U.S. Central Command is going to establish a civil-military coordination center in Israel that will help facilitate the flow of humanitarian aid as well as logistical and security assistance into the territory. So to be clear, these are U.S. troops inside of Israel. We already have a U.S. military presence in Israel. It's relatively minor. It's not like a major U.S. military base by any stretch of the imagination. We do have military personnel there. So that's not all that new. This standing up of a civil military coordination center would be new. But to stress, it is not in Gaza. It is in Israel. I think that's important to note here. For some reason, I did see the White House press secretary called some of this out as false reporting. So I'm just going to share this entire segment here. I'm not sure what the issue was, but Fox News said U.S. troops headed to Israel to support historic peace deal. That seems to have been confirmed by multiple accounts. And the press secretary pushed back on this, saying it's not true. Up to 200 U.S. personnel who are already stationed in CENTCOM will be tasked with monitoring the peace agreement in Israel, and they will work with other international forces on the ground. That seems like the same thing as is being reported in Fox News and the Associated Press. I know there's going to be a lot of contention around this and probably misrepresenting some of the information now that we have U.S. troops involved in any way, shape, or form, so wanted to give as much context there as I could. Now, in terms of what to watch for going forward here, to me, it's all about the next 3 days. There's so much nuance and little details we could get into about the future of the Palestinian state and the rebuilding and the reconstruction and security guarantees and all that. I don't think any of that matters quite yet. We got to get through these first 3 days. And these first off, does the ceasefire hold? We just have not seen a lot of ceasefires hold. So there's number one. Does the ceasefire hold? If the ceasefire does hold for 3 days, or I should say long enough to get the hostages and the prisoner exchange to take place, that's the next big one. Those two things. If those two don't occur, then I don't know what we're doing here. We're just, and Netanyahu has already mentioned, like, they'll go back in if need be. So those are the only two things I'm watching in the next couple days. Assuming those two things hold, and we get to the 72-hour mark, and let's say all of the living hostages have been returned, and most of the remains have been returned, with Israel understanding Hamas is still trying to locate some of them, then we get into more nuanced details of what does the next governance structure look like? What are we going to do about Hamas and their weapons? Is there any sort of amnesty granted for Hamas fighters? What does the security situation look like around Gaza? What about international actors coming in to assist with the rebuilding? Gets into a very long and detailed conversation. I think it's best to hold on that until we make sure this very important first step of a ceasefire and then the hostage and prisoner exchange actually takes place in the next 72 hours. But for now, no doubt, this is the closest we have been to an actual long-term sustainable peace between Israel and Hamas since the war began 2 years ago. So fingers crossed that it actually holds. Keep an eye on it. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.